all we're talking about here is working in truth. And the question is, whose truth, right? For me is like, if we're working in a truth that was brought here that is, that isn't acknowledging the true history of the places that we live and work, then to me, that is colonization. Right. And because all of that too, in that truth, like we've changed laws, we've changed values, we've changed currency, right? Like those are all legacies of colonialism. And we're still living in that world today. Right. And I don't think it's a term that need be divisive or anything like that. It just simply is. It is just what happened here. It's not like you're a bad guy and I'm the good guy. Like, that's not, to me, that is not what it is. It's just being rooted in truth. And that can, yes, that can be uncomfortable for people, especially if they learned, a different version of events. But understanding that history and how rapidly things changed, I think, gives people a lot of context to be sympathetic, to think about things differently, and to understand that maybe the systems that were brought here actually just aren't that great.
Hey folks, what's happening? Welcome to Your Forest. My name is Matthew Kristoff, and on this podcast, we talk about the environment and the science of sustainability. Now, this is the third last episode of Your Forest that I ever plan on making, and it's a doozy. It's a heck of an episode. There's so much here to appreciate and enjoy and learn from and grow from. It's just, couldn't ask for a better episode. And because it is the third last one, I want to say thank you to everybody that supported me, all of the sponsors, and especially all the listeners. All of you have made this possible for me to do these deep dives, to have these conversations. And I can't thank you all enough for following me on this journey. So today's episode is with Dr. Jennifer Grenz. Jennifer has her Bachelor's of Science in Agroecology and a PhD in Integrated Studies in Land and Food Systems from the University of British Columbia. She also is a teacher there, professor there. She started her own lab called the Indigenous Ecology Lab, where they are applying an Indigenous worldview to our role in ecosystem management as we face a rapidly changing climate. She's basically finding ways to bring Indigenous knowledge and Western science together to make our knowledge and understanding stronger and better and more human-centric, right? And also, the reason she's on today, or an additional reason, additional to the Indigenous Ecology Lab, which I was made aware of, was her book, Medicine Wheel for the Planet, A Journey Toward Personal and Ecological Healing. Amazing book. I cannot recommend it enough. It's up there for, mind-blowing, just awe-inspiring thought, like braiding sweetgrass and serviceberry. It's just, it's such an incredible read. Definitely go out and buy it. And also you could listen to it on Audible. She actually does the reading herself and makes it really, really good. That's what I did. It was great. And so I wanted to bring her on to talk about decolonization. Like, what is decolonization? What exactly are we talking about? And to talk about how we do more two-eyed seeing. What is the process of bringing Indigenous knowledge and Western science together? What does that look like? Because we get all tied up in knots trying to figure out how these complement each other, but she blazes this path that is just makes sense. It just makes sense, and it's a breath of fresh air. So, you're gonna love the conversation all about decolonization and what we can do to change the way we manage our landscape and ourselves. It's really, really great. So, sponsors for this episode, West Fraser is the number one sponsor for this year, and they have been for almost the entire time. Could not thank West Fraser enough for their support over the years. It's been amazing. And Greenlink Forestry also has been an unwavering supporter since the very beginning. Thank you, Greenlink. Would not be possible without you. So, without any further messing around, let's dive into learning all about decolonization, how Western science and Indigenous worldviews and knowledge can work together for a better future. Here we go. Well, first and foremost, thank you very much once again for taking the time. This is awesome. I'm really, grateful that you took the time to do this, because there's so much here to discuss. And I really appreciated the book, Medicine Wheel for the Planet. I feel like this was kind of the third book installment for me that's kind of helped me down this path. Like, first was Braiding Sweetgrass, like really opened up my mind and kind of filled in these gaps in my understanding that I knew existed but didn't know how to explain it. And just kind of, I was like, oh, okay, this brought something to me. And then Serviceberry, again, same kind of feeling, right? Like this idea of reciprocity and this idea of like, this is how we need to live. Like, what do we do? And just like kind of really like shook my world. And then your book, honestly, like very much like filling in more of that understanding and helping me to appreciate an entirely different worldview, and one that I feel that is just so healthy and balanced with like the human soul, as well as the scientific rigor. And just like, it's just, I don't know, it's complex, but it's just a nice little ball, and it feels complete, I should say. Right. And so yeah, I'm pumped to get into it and to pick your brain a little bit more, because it was just such an experience. So first, I think we should get to know you a little bit, and
Sure.
I would love to hear more about where you're from, like where you grew up, and what that space was like, what the people were like, and how that has influenced your path in life.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the Metro Vancouver area in Delta. I was very much sort of a South Delta farm kid.
Okay. Yeah.
So food was always front and center. And I was very, very lucky to kind of have, what I call my pseudo parents, my riding instructor and her husband, who are very devoted to food production in the Delta area. So, I rode horses and watched food growing and was part of that. And so I think that, that connection, is really important to shaping who I am and what I've become. And then also, I grew up with a great grandmother and grandmother who loved gardening, and being in their garden really is like, central to my memories of my early childhood, and then with my father sort of following him around in my rubber boots along the edges of creeks and, fishing and being trapped in a boat with him, which now I see as a parent was an excellent strategy to spend time with your child. Like it was just a childhood full of, connectivity to growing things, producing things, being connected to nature. I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. I went to school I started actually at the U of A. That probably kind of derailed everything for me, actually, is that, this agrologist came in and gave a presentation in our biology class. And I was like, agroecology, what is that?
Yeah.
And after spending a year there, because the winters were way too cold for me, I went back to the
enough.
West Coast. Yeah. I even left my husband behind. I was like, okay, you can finish working. I'm going home. I'm not built for this. And then I started in the agroecology program thinking I wanted to be a vet. But then I met plants and was like, wait a minute, this is what my whole life has really been about. And I can't believe you can even have a job doing this. So yeah, from there, it just, went on into working for environmental nonprofit organizations and working for myself. And I don't really identify as an academic at all. I always joke that I identify as a practitioner. I feel like I kind of did things backwards. I went and had an almost 20-year career in ecological restoration. And and then was told I didn't have enough letters after my last name to say the things I was saying at conferences. So I went and got those letters with my kids in tow, and now
just a middle finger to the guy. Hey, you're just like,
right,
oh,
yeah, yeah, I'm gonna do it, right? Like that was a challenge. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
People think like, oh, you would be really offended by that, but I wasn't. It was somebody who meant a lot to me and who really spoke his mind, and he wasn't necessarily wrong in one sense. And yeah, and it was a great opportunity to be able to look back on the career that I'd built and the things that I was doing that were feeling tremendously wrong and ineffective. Yeah, and then I managed to infiltrate the academy, and here I am now at the lab, and I'm an academic. So
yeah, right, yeah. Well, yeah, it's fascinating listening to you break that down in the book, right? Like how like that journey of being an invasive species ecologist and then starting to question and be like, wait, why are we getting rid of these here, but then eating the berries jubilantly over here? And why are we, and like just this whole back and forth of trying to figure out, like one thing that you brought forth that really blew my mind was the idea of nativeness in plants. And when you mentioned the part about, I think it was Western red cedar, I think you had mentioned, was actually not native to the coast until 5,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So there was people around before cedars were around. And like that is a staple of the coast. Now everyone thinks, oh, it's always been here. This is the reality. And it's like, well, actually, no. And you're like, whoa, that just blew my mind, right? And maybe realize that like, no, plants move, ecology changes, like climates change, and like we are a part of that now. And
totally. I mean, it's
fighting it all the time.
It's wild that a cultural keystone species, right? Like even that people equate with, the people of these lands, like was a newcomer, within our time of being here. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy, the thing about the book that's been really fun for me is so many people that I have worked with have like come to me after and been like, I remember when we did that. And I remember that. And I thought it was wrong too. And and like that my inner monologue is shared amongst so many of the professionals that I have worked with over the years. Right. But we just like keep doing this thing because it feels like also something that we shouldn't probe or question because we don't want to like undermine the sacredness of it, and the good intentions of what we're all trying to do, which is heal land. Right. But it is something that we need to be probing and questioning and trying to get better at because, I just watched also, I think working with volunteers really changes you because for someone to choose to spend their limited extra time out doing something, like it had better be worth their while, and to just keep bringing them to the same wall of blackberries, like, the burnout was real. Like we would get down to like the last 7 retired biologists every weekend doing the same thing, it's great to be able now to like have opened up this conversation. Cause even I think the scariest presentation I ever had, like before the book came out and when I was like finishing my PhD, is like I gave the keynote at the Canadian Weed Science Society conference in 2019. And I talked about this, like, and I was shaking and my heart was racing. And I never get nervous before presentations, but this was like going back to my mentors, like, my invasive species and weedy peeps, and saying like, do you think maybe we're not kind of thinking about this the right way? and when I was done, there was a lineup, like my friend was joking, there was a lineup of cowboys, hat in hand, waiting to talk to me. Some that had tears in their eyes that were like, I've been thinking this for the last 30 years of my career, So I feel like, it was maybe the right time. And like, I've been in their world, but I really hope we get more conversations around this and that we realize that just trying to do things better doesn't undermine the mission.
Right. Because it feels good. Like, oh yeah, invasive species, they're not native, they're killing off the local ecology. Like this is a good, like we're doing good things. These are good things, but it feels wrong. You're like, why does it feel wrong? But because we can't put our finger on it, there's this just momentum of, and it's hard to slow down, right? Until someone points it out, and you pointed it out, which is amazing.
Well, I've tried. I mean, I think it's just one of those things too, where advocacy gets tangled up with the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so we get caught up in our own hyperbole, right? Which is like a really effective tool in environmental education, and really important. But then we we're like, oh, maybe I don't quite believe the lore that I'm putting out here, but then like also, how do we find words to describe what it is that we're doing when we're trying to convince politicians to give us money to do it, and like, that's also really, and to convince the public that the stuff that we're doing is important too. Yeah. But I think this is where like the introduction of a relational worldview helps us to find that language.
Absolutely. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I want to jump from there into like your realization of, or maybe it wasn't a realization, but whatever it was, like you were in academia, even though you don't call yourself an academic, but you were in it and you were doing the science thing, right? And can you tell us about that experience and when you came to the realization that there was something missing here, that this doesn't feel right, and you started feeling that pull towards indigenous knowledge systems and just that missing piece, right? Like there's something about Western academia that feels soulless, and it's the guise of objectivity, as you say many times in the book, right? And so I want to talk about that and kind of what that was like to try and point that out, because I think science is so good at creating the dogma of being like, nope, this isn't a spiritual thing. This isn't this is about objectivity, and this is about data, and this is about you point where the numbers go, and this is very, very respectable, and you can't touch it, and it's not about humanity. This is about numbers. And you're like, yes, okay. Yeah. So
very good impression.
So I want to understand that moment.
Yeah. I think for me, it was just like a series of moments, like where you're finally connect all of the dots of your experience. And I think realizing what made me feel good when I was out in the field, like what was the work that really felt right. And, I started working with land guardians before land guardians were really known as a thing, and in fact, like it was with BC Parks, the work that I was doing, and I think they called them observers at the time, but they became the land guardians. And I just remember at first being, even as an Indigenous person, a little annoyed that there are these people coming out with us that are going to slow us down, right? Like, what do they know about what we're doing? And then as I was like we were going out with them, I learned more out in the field in 10 minutes with them than I had my whole career. And like, again, like there was this tension where it was like, oh, they're wasting our time. They're dragging us down this other trail to like show us this cool skeleton of a bear, or like to this lake, or, but then in those moments, like just learning more about their territory and what they knew, I was like, whoa, like, I want more of this. Like, how did this get missed in my education? Like even just understanding the history of a place. Like we were managing Japanese knotweed, up the Indian River, and like talking about the internment camps that were, the internment camp that was up there, and like, and that maybe that was what introduced this plant, because it's a food plant and used by Japanese people. And like just talking about the history, like I was the kid who loved science. Like I hated history, like social studies was like
same
the worst, right? Like, and then this also just like was like, wait a minute, like this history is relevant to understanding what's going on out there. And then just the being driven by the love of land and place, and letting that kind of lead our curiosity. Like I think for me, it was just, I don't care. Like, I don't care about being objective. And I remember like I was reading Braiding Sweetgrass like in the bathtub when I was doing my PhD, feeling like, holy crap, like someone is speaking what is on my heart every time I'm out in the bush. Like, this is a thing. Like, all these feelings are legit, and it's okay, you know? And I think maybe I was at a bit of an advantage at that point too, where I've established myself in my field, you know, like, so I'm not like someone new that's going,
you have a
like,
reputation. Yeah.
Right. Like, we should turn this on its head. I'm like, hey, you know, I think we could do this better. And so, so I think for me, like, it was just this, like, I just want to work in a way that's congruent with what's on my heart. And I just really don't care. And maybe this is part of also my radical anti-era. Like, I don't care what other people think anymore. Like, you know, and I think that's also, you know, why my lab is structured the way it is. Like, we work entirely in service to Indigenous communities. So they're leading the question. They're, you know, and I'll bring all the scientific tools in. Like, I want to get as much data for them because that's an important knowledge translation exercise, right? You know, and but we're gonna use it and analyze it in a different way, or we're gonna ask different questions. But you know, we're along for their ride and supporting whatever it is that they want for outcomes. And again, like, I learn all the time. I just came from Quaker First Nation, you know, up in the North Coast off Campbell River, in Phillips Arm. And like, I've left with 3 days more knowledge than I had when I left. Like, it's just, there's just so much more that we can learn in practices like silence and listening and being open and being okay with feeling what it is that we're taking in.
Yeah, you're right. Because like science tries to remove that feeling, or it tries to remove the human element of it entirely. And you're like, well, but like, if you're feeling something, that's a hint. There's something going on there. Like, maybe you can't put it into words, can't put your finger on the problem, but you know that it's like when you meet a person and like, everyone's like, oh, you'll meet this person, you're going to love this person. This person's great. And you meet them and you're like, I'm not good with this person. And they're like, why? I'm like, I don't know. They give me the creeps. I don't like them. Something's off. They're like, oh, they're so friendly. And they're like, yeah, I don't trust them. I don't know. Like, you can't put your finger on it, but it's there. Right. Yeah. And why not trust that instinct in science as well? Like, we are human. Science is a human endeavor. Why would we remove humanity from, or try to? It's insane to try.
And also, like, tell me one person who isn't in their particular line of work because there was something that motivated them to care about it.
Right. Totally.
Right. Like, you know, like, so we're not objective even in choosing the thing that we're doing.
Yeah. Right.
So like, so let's just be honest, right? Like, why am I in this? I love the land. I love the people of the land. I want to make things better. Like, and I think my science is so much better by being honest about that. You know, then, and also like now, I mean, like, so many elders over time told me, like, you got to talk to the plants, you got to listen to the plants. And I never like really understood what that meant. And I feel like just over the last couple of years, especially like I talk to the plants all the time, like, but you know, think of how much more you learn in a conversation rather than reading someone's bio.
Yeah. So right. You know? Exactly. Yeah.
And that's how it feels to me. Like, why are you here? Like, where did you come from? Like, tell me your story, you know, instead of like reading in Pojar, you know, about this plant. Right.
Yep. I think, no, I totally, I can see where you're coming from. Cause I think a big moment for me in coming to this was like reading Braiding Sweetgrass and talking about like you're saying, the difference between an object and an individual. Right? Like, you can mistreat an object and it doesn't matter. But if you treat that plant as an individual, as something that is growing, it is living, it is doing stuff, it is interacting with the land, and all of a sudden it's a lot harder to mistreat something that you think of as an individual, which they are, right? And that shifted a lot for me as well, right? Realizing like, oh yeah, no, I was just out here with my ego, tramp around, being like, oh, I'm the master of the forest. I know all the plants. That's a this and this is a that, and they do this, they interact this way, but you're not really appreciating it, not really getting it, not getting the full thing. And I think it's so easy for people to look at like what you're talking to the plants. Like, okay. Like,
well, I mean, you should see my grad students' faces, right? I mean, I'm sure like they're like, our supervisor's a little special, like, but then when they can let go of all the inhibitions that come from like how we're kind of socialized to be in science, right? Or like to be logical or whatever it is. Like, I know that they tell me like, I feel way better about what I do working that way. And having a conversation and giving animacy to something doesn't mean that we don't shape it or decide that it's not part of the ecology of a place that we're trying to curate, right? Like you might not make the cut, right? But we're giving consideration to you and what you might offer. And I think that, that is something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, is, how we understand place and challenge these concepts of naturalness, or even like what a forest actually is. Is really important to like how we do better going forward.
Yeah, totally. And for me, like I didn't grow up with like indigenous knowledge systems, and I don't have the like spiritual connection as far as like understanding the spirits of rocks and plants and how all that interacts, right? It's not my reality as of yet. But simply as a human exercise of like talking to the plants isn't, in my mind, for me, that's not for the plant as much as it is for you to understand and just like work through what you're feeling right now, say it out loud and see how that feels. And maybe it helps you come to some realization you haven't before, right? And at least for me, right? That's like, I don't know how other people feel about it, but it's, for me, it's an act of, I don't know, reciprocity, I guess. You're just trying to like connect, and relational, I guess, is the way you would put it, I suppose. And I've appreciated the need for shifting our mindset. Like, for example, I was recently at my first sweat, and I was asking an elder about, because I wanted to start talking to somebody about giving back to the land when I'm picking Saskatoons or whatever, right? Like, okay, how do I know like a lot of indigenous peoples are giving tobacco, right? And that experience. And I was speaking with this elder, and I was like, is it offensive for me? Like, I don't have the cultural heritage to like give tobacco in that way, but I want to do something reciprocal. And I don't have something that I feel like I can give in that way. And I was like, what is the relationship here? Like, is this me stepping into something that I shouldn't be? Or is this like, how do I go about that? And like, for me, it was so funny because I was like, for me, the closest thing I can think of that I have like a really emotional relationship with for plants, I was like, is coffee. It's like, so can I give coffee back? And she just laughed at me. Right. And she's like, that's not why we do it. I'm like, okay. and she explained a little bit more of the history of tobacco and the story, and she kind of just looked at me dumbfounded, and she's like, of course you can give tobacco. Like, if that feels right, do it. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. I was thinking too much about it, right? Like, it was interesting.
Well, there is a point there too, like this awkwardness of doing just that, right? Like, like I actually, so I gave like a guest lecture. So Dr. Nicholas Coops is our department head in forest resources management at UBC, and his lab, the Integrated Remote Sensing Studio. I went and gave a talk at their lab retreat. And I gave them all tobacco. And I said, like, all of you are going to go out. You're going to find a tree on your own. You're just going to introduce yourself, tell them what you're doing here, and just put it down. And like, these are all like GIS people, right? Like, they're mostly behind a desk, right? And I just, but it was interesting to watch them approach it and realize like they've never even been given that opportunity to figure out what that means. Like, because it's a symbol, right? And I don't think that's appropriation to figure out like what feels good. And it's a good way to just start that practice. But then to think like, for me, that's not something that I do very much, because I'm like, I'm going to go pull that invasive plant over there instead, or I'm going to try and help this place where I am, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because for me, like actions are more important also than these sort of, right? Like,
yes.
but
Okay.
to me, I think it's like a symbol of my commitment to action, my, if I'm in that moment where I can't necessarily do something right away, but yeah, I just realized, with students in particular, is like, they've never been trained how to do this.
Yeah.
And I just think like, wow, my work would have been so much better if I had started out this way. Like, because also just, it requires humility too, right? When you're giving something. Yeah. And just to think like, what is it that I'm doing out here? Is it helping? Is it extractive? Is it, yeah. So
absolutely.
I think these are important practices for everybody to consider, like even just as a check on your work. Like, I just think of like how many times I was wearing, and this might be controversial for some people, but wearing a backpack full of herbicide to manage invasive species, where I'm pulling the trigger on something thinking, this is stupid. Like, this makes no sense. Like, I've been coming to this site for 7 years now. Nothing is different. Like, the government just keeps telling me to come back here.
Right.
But maybe if I had listened to that, like, was that the plant talking to me? Like we can interpret it any way we want, right? But like,
sure,
maybe then I could have taken that and done something with it instead of just leaving it on the list and, being a good little foot soldier, right? Like, but also like, I realize now too, like the people that make those lists don't necessarily have a relationship with place, and they don't know, like, maybe I was supposed to be the messenger of the plant telling me this is not the way.
Right. But it's just like paying attention to those feelings. Like, why not bring that into your work? I love that. That's so good. Like, it just humanizes the whole thing and makes it this, again, it brings in the reciprocity aspect of like, okay, well, let's make sure that this makes sense. This is balanced. This is considered. We're thinking about the big picture. And like you're talking about the humility aspect. And so I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I started, when we went and picked Saskatoons and stuff this year, I was teaching her about, I was like, yeah, we're going to go to the plant, and we're going to like offer some tobacco. We're going to talk to it and say thank you and appreciate it. And like all the, whatever. Right. And like no qualms, just like jumped right in. She's like, I'm about this. This is awesome. And I'm like, wow. I wish all people could, like, wish adults could step outside that, right?
It's inherent in kids, and like it's, I was just we were just talking about harvesting responsibly and like what that means, like in a context like that, right? And I was telling this story of like, we also farm, and we used to raise chickens, and I would say to my kids, like, you can't waste that chicken because the chicken had to die for you to eat that, right? Which I think like a lot of people thought maybe my parenting style was a little bit much, but like they still carry that with them. And like, even when we're harvesting berries or like any plants like Devil's Club or whatever, like that, do we need this much? Like, are we going to make sure we're using this? Like, they have kind of brought that reverence into their daily lives. And I know it's from that moment of being like, thank you. Right, for your sacrifice to give this thing to me, whether it's a chicken or a huckleberry plant or what, because that, that's where, we start running into these really extractive things that we're witnessing on land. Like, the other thing that this reminded me of is we harvested some mushrooms this week while we were out working. But I work a lot in the wildfire recovery context, and, all of Vancouver is like super excited. All roads lead up into my territory, St'át'imc territory, where just these mega fires have occurred. There's so much trauma in the people and the land of what's happened. And they're like, oh, look at all the mushrooms, right on, score, right? And they're out there just picking. And those of us who are out there like, what do we do with this moonscape now? Like, what did you do for the land? Like, you're just... like, did you say a thank you? Because I think if you had a moment's pause as a mushroom picker to say like, thank you for this trauma that caused this opportunity, I just kind of wonder if you would pick so much.
Right? Totally. And then go and sell it at the farmer's market. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a healthy relationship, right? Like and I appreciated that about the book. I appreciate that about your lab and your perspective. And it just like, I think questioning our relationship to land and how we give back and how we think about it is just, it's such a powerful place to start. To just get people to ask those questions, right? Like, okay, well, you're taking that. What have you done for this space, right?
Yeah,
how have you given back?
And I think, like I hammer a lot on modern environmentalism. Like I think we've done some things very wrong because like when you start out with a relationship like that, it doesn't mean you can't take, you can't receive. We've been shaping environments to, have resources. And I'm not afraid of that word. Like, I hate that word has become a bad word. Like, no, part of our relationship is health for both. Like, reciprocity causes health for both sides, right? That's how it should work. And so I think also it also kind of helps us to think carefully about when we do take and what that looks like. As opposed to just extraction.
Yes. Well, like in our society, Western society talks so much about sustainability. It's the big buzzword, right? Sustainable. This is the ultimate in sustainability, right? Like if you think about, like if you're always thinking about what is going to happen to this place after you do this thing, right? So like down the road, or like, how am I giving back, or what is my relationship like? Like if I take this now, can someone else come later? And like, when you start thinking that way, all of a sudden, you don't take as much, and you're not greedy, and you start to consider the consequences of your actions. And like you said, this reciprocity thing means that humans and the land can prosper. Both sides can prosper. It doesn't mean we're not taking, we're also giving. And so is the land.
Right. Yeah. And I think that requires like intention also in like, what is a place? Like I just spent all week, we're in this area where there's been some really heavy logging done in the past. The nation wants it to be a forest. And I was talking to the students about my latest thing is like, why are we calling tree plantations forests?
Sure.
And I think if we were more clear about what, broad, landscape management was, it would actually help everybody, forestry and the forests, to say this area is a tree plantation. So what does that look like? Well, that looks like farming, right? Like, so yeah, sure. Of course you're going to have monoculture. There's going to be disturbance. There's going to be harvest. And then over here is a forest. Well, what does that mean? That's not a monoculture. That's not, right? Like that is different. Right. And if we set that intention for a space, then also that helps us to process that relationship or talk, to the land and do, because the reciprocity is different also in those contexts.
Yes.
And so, so this is just like something I've been feeling a lot is like, you think about I feel like I have also helped raise a generation of people who aren't so kind to forestry, because of forest practices. And like, maybe that's fair. But then I kind of think like, if I had said to them, this is a tree plantation, maybe they wouldn't be so upset about forestry that's happening where we've said that we're growing trees for that purpose. Right? Instead of like, okay, these are the headwaters of an estuary. That's a forest that needs to be managed like that. Yeah. So
totally. No, I get it. That makes sense. It makes sense. Like there's ways that you can extract wood from the forest without, it doesn't have to be this way. This doesn't have to be this simple way. There's ways that we can have this relationship that is more reciprocal. It is healthier for land. Forest health is the number one value as opposed to timber, right? Yeah. That changes our expectations.
Sure. But in some cases too, like I feel like if we untangle those two things, then we're not trying to make something into something it just cannot be.
Right. I understand what you're saying.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
Because we just spent 3 days bushwhacking through what I would call a biodesert underneath the trees.
Right.
We were doing light meter readings. Like this is stands that were like 25 to 30 years old. Not a lot, no real thinning had been done. So that's also kind of a problem. But like we had 1 micromole of light. And so it was just brown. Like it was just, there's nothing, there's no life under there.
Right.
And like none of the animal tracks are through there. There's no, right. And like the students were like, this is awful, whatever. And I said, well, like, this was a tree plantation, so this is what we should expect here. But if we move over that way where it's a forest, there's life, right? So
Right.
and like we're actually trying to turn an old tree plantation back into a forest,
Right.
and they were like, oh, right. Huh. Like, so I just think we can't have reciprocity or anything until we're really grounded in truth of what it is that we're trying to do. And I think there's nothing wrong with the truth saying, this is going to be wood to build houses. We're growing wood. That's what we're doing. Right.
Yeah.
But we're not doing it everywhere.
Right. Yeah. Understanding limitations. Yeah.
And is it like more on do we need to build mosaics, right? Where there's forest interspersed with tree plantation,
right.
And so this is just where I just feel like if we were more grounded in truth about what we were trying to do and not try to make one thing another, then we can really talk about what reciprocity looks like in those contexts.
Absolutely. That totally makes sense. There's a study here, the EMEN study, and Ellen McDonald was talking to me about the idea that like we've spent all this time in Alberta saying that we're harvesting like to mimic wildfire, and that's the idea. Like we're harvesting the patterns of wildfire. And she's like, do they grow back that way? And she's like, well, no, of course they don't. She's like, they're not the same thing. They're totally different disturbances, and we need to stop pretending that they're the same. Let's just admit that, like, this is not a wildfire. It's going to grow different. It's going to be different. It's a different disturbance. And let's just accept that. That's okay. But we have to think about how we're going to do this so that it is reciprocal and that it is giving back to the ecology of the landscape, not just for timber, right? So, exactly. Like you were saying, right? Just like, let's be honest with ourselves. This is not a fire. It will never be a fire. This is a cut block, and that's okay. But let's work with that information and move forward. Yeah. Stop expecting it to be something that it's not. Yeah. Totally.
Well, and this is like where I think we oversimplify things. Like I think this is also the advantage of the relational worldview is like, let's really start to talk about what it is that we're actually trying to do and how it's connected to all the things around us, right? But trying to make something into something that it's not. Like we're not fooling ourselves. I mean, I feel like this was my problem in weed management, right? Is like I'm trying to fool myself that there's this very clean line between things that belong and things that don't, right? But like telling us like, oh, well, cutting trees is like fire. Like, come on, it's not. It's not the same thing at all. Like, so let's just be real about it and also not feel shameful for doing something that we're all reliant upon to some extent and in some way. But surely then we can have a good starting point to be making things better and doing things better, right?
Yeah.
But if we're like,
let's be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in this case, like we had some thinning treatments, that we were talking about, and it was like, well, if we open up light, then, everything will come back. And I'm like, yeah, but opening up light, like that's not disturbance. Like we, how's this, like, again, we're trying to make something like oversimplify and not really, think about what it is that generates life and what it is that we're trying to make a place be like. I often feel like like we need to like be more childlike also, we're like, let's draw the picture of what it is that we're trying to make. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Because all we throw around are buzzwords, and then, but we don't really know, like, what does it mean? Sustainable forestry in this spot.
We do get lost in the jargon, don't we? Like, we like to throw around the big words and like, well, I don't know. I've thought about this, and this is a term that I learned, and I'm going to spout it out so you think that I'm cool and I know what I'm talking about. And like, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah. No, I think, no, absolutely. Like, just, if we can be honest with ourselves, that's a jumping point into real conversations that make real change that benefit everybody and everything in the end, right? So that absolutely, that totally makes sense. That relational worldview is just it's so important. Okay, I do want to get into. We talked before we started recording about like the concept of decolonization, because this is what we're talking about. We're talking about this idea of decolonization.
Yep.
But first and foremost, what I've found before talking about decolonization, you need to really need to explain colonialism, right? Because people, I think a lot of folks still think that like, oh yeah, like the colonists, like that time. And you're like, no, this is colonialism now. Like what we're living in is colonialism. This capitalist mentality, this world, this is colonialism. Let's not forget that. And I think So how would you define like colonialism and characterize colonialism, and therefore from there we can jump into decolonization, right?
Sure.
And what that might look for.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think we've given ourselves an awesome segue with what we were just talking about, which is like, to me, because I think it's also jargon that gets thrown around a lot. And I think that doesn't necessarily always help us, in a mission to decolonize or indigenize. But for me, I think simply put, and I think a thing that, makes it maybe less scary or less nebulous is all we're talking about here is working in truth. And the question is, whose truth? Right. And so I think like for me is like, if we're working in a truth that was brought here, that is, that isn't acknowledging the true history of the places that we live and work, then to me, that is colonization. Right. And because all of that too, in that truth, like we've changed laws, we've changed values, we've changed currency, right? Like those are all legacies of colonialism. And we're still living in that world today. Right.
Yeah.
But it's, and I don't think it's a term that need be divisive or anything like that. It just simply is. It is just what happened here, and like, I love, like, I mean, I'm kind of a nightmare for my children's teachers over the years, right? When they learn history, right? And I'm like, well, why is your history start in, 1867? Like,
that's a weird place to start.
That's a weird, but why did we choose that date to start? Yeah. Right. But it's, I think like, ecology and like historical ecology actually provides a really great opportunity to teach people about what colonialism is in a non-threatening way. Is like, people love to learn more about nature, right? And it's like, did you know that, we used to like burn forests to keep them healthy and keep us safe? And, like, people really like, well, yeah, like, what we're living in now, like, that's a legacy of colonialism, and like, it's not like you're a bad guy and I'm the good guy. Like, that's not, to me, that is not what it is. It's just, being rooted in truth. And that can be uncomfortable for people, especially if they learned, a different version of events, but understanding that history and how rapidly things changed, I think, gives people a lot of context to be sympathetic, to think about things differently, and to understand that maybe the systems that were brought here actually just aren't that great.
Totally.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, my students, and I'm going off on too much of a tangent, but my students are working in community, and part of that expectation is you are in community. So you're not just doing your research. You're helping to cut firewood. You're helping to dry fish. You're attending events and help, right? You are in community. Well, what happens then? They're sent home with a whole bunch of jarred fish, right? They're sent home with firewood. They're right. Like, and realizing that there is a community of care. And I've had so many students say to me, like, man, if everyone could just live, and it's not to like romanticize our communities. We have challenges like any other community, but this looking out for, making sure people are fed, making sure people are cared for, especially elders and parents, and right. Like, and that is something that they're like, how do we bring that into our lives, our daily lives? Like, to me, it's like, this is them decolonizing. Like, this is them realizing that these systems of laws and, social structures and all of that, like, they're maybe not working as well. Right. Yeah. But that's colonization. Like, we're all subject to it. And I think that also is something that gets missed, is that in many respects, we are all living in its reality, and it doesn't necessarily work for Indigenous people. It doesn't necessarily work for non-Indigenous people. Like, this is just a system that was imposed upon this place and all of us. And I think, decolonization is challenging all of the truths from which we've been told to operate from. Right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I love that. You're just like, hey, We're just questioning whether or not this is the absolute best way to do things.
Right.
Because obviously not.
Right. Like, like if we have food insecurity, I feel like we're failing, right? You know, like, and so what my goal is, like, question these systems that are causing discomfort in your life. And I think we all have discomfort in our lives. It doesn't matter what walk of life you come from. And I think when I come at it like that, I mean, we work in really remote areas with people with vastly different politics, right?
Sure.
But like, there are so many unifying discomforts that we both have. We might just think a little bit differently about them. But boy, as soon as we start talking about them, I mean, like, one of my favorite examples of that is, many rural communities, including where I live, people fill their freezer with land-based and water-based protein sources that they get themselves, right? So they're hunting, as an example. Impacts of things like wildfire or forestry, after wildfire, have an impact on things like mule deer, whether you're Indigenous or non-Indigenous. Now, who has we can talk about who has rights first to that. That might be a different thing, but we both care about that thing. And that, to me, like, we both say something's wrong here. The deer aren't healthy. We aren't watching everything. That, to me, is challenging colonization. We've both been, this system is not working for both of us. So, so this is why, like, I try and focus less on the jargon and the words and just the issues.
I love that. Well, and I like even bringing it into, like, our education system is a colonized education system, right? Like, you ship your kids off and they learn all day and come back, and some random person, whereas you think about, like, Indigenous worldviews where the community is, like, you're constantly involved in the teaching, and it's a reciprocal event, and you're learning through stories and that's also another way that you can learn things, right?
Well, and how many kids have had discomfort? I mean, including my own, in an education system that was designed for the Industrial Revolution. Like,
exactly.
Whereas, like, and this is the difference too. Like, so, is it that we want to decolonize the education system or indigenize it, where we recognize talents and gifts in kids and develop those, right? Instead, right?
We don't need to make more worker bees. We need to make unique individuals with unique values and unique perspectives.
Everybody has
skills.
Gifts to contribute. Everybody does, right? But to me, like, cultivating those, that is something that we do culturally that, I would love to see extracted, right?
Yeah, right.
Like, you don't have to go down this path that's going to cause you more harm. But so for me, it's just, it's like challenging these systems that cause these pinch points. And I think, one of the, it's kind of a weird thing to say, but, like, one of the advantages that we have here, especially in the Pacific Northwest, is we have a very short colonial history compared to most places in the world, right?
Right.
And so we are, I mean, this is where it's weird to say fortunate, but we're still here. I mean, everyone's still here, but we have lived memory of the before times, right?
Sure.
And so we have this unique position to say, could there be better ways of doing things? And learning from those systems that existed before, in the before times, because, like, and that was really apparent to me, like, I was doing some work at the University of Georgia. Like, they don't even know. There's so much harm and colonialism and slavery. Like, they're like, okay, we go back like 500 years. Like, we're not even sure what the land looked like. Like, we're trying, right? Like, there's just, and it was just really, for me, like, wow, like, where I just was, when I got off my boat this morning, like that probably looks very much like it has.
Right. I
mean, and the stories are still within lived memory of how those lands were cared for, who was there, what happened. Like, that is very unique. And so
that's a very interesting point. Yeah, you're right. It's
so
like a very thin veil.
Yeah. And so I think we have, just where we are, where we work, something that is incredibly different than even other parts of Canada.
Mm-hmm. Oh, of course. Yeah. Like the East Coast, obviously, same thing, like 500 years where.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. I never thought about it. I never considered that. Right. And yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, like, because some people treat, the whole decolonization, like, including indigenous knowledges, like, oh, you're just on some trend or whim or whatever.
Sure.
And I've even had students from other places be like, what's like indigenous everything here? But I'm like, yeah, but that's because like, it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. This is still part of the active living culture that's like, it hasn't been lost. It's still here. And it's, totally. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, and I also appreciate though that even in your book, you talk about this isn't like erasing colonization, because like you talk about appreciating knowledge systems, right? And I really appreciated the way you put this, because like there's a lot of talk about, oh, we're braiding, these knowledge systems are integrating, and you made this amazing metaphor in the book about paint, right? And the idea of like, oh, we're gonna, like, if you take whatever 3 different colors of paint and like, it's great, we're going to mix them all together, it's going to be perfect, it's going to be, it just turns brown, this shitty brown color that's useless.
Yeah.
But if you leave those 3 paints separate, they remain vibrant, they remain strong, they remain capable of doing amazing things. But they can work side by side, they can work together and support each other. So we need to stop thinking that like, oh, science needs to integrate Western knowledge or indigenous knowledge, or the other way around, or braiding. Like braiding, you mentioned, like every time you're braiding, you're missing half of it. You're losing half of it every time, and or a third of it, I should say. And it's just all just missing. It's gone. And so like we need to stop with this type of work and just. I think like you made the case for the need to recognize and respect all knowledge systems, and to develop the wisdom to know when to draw from each.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's perfect. That's perfect. You're like, we need to stop thinking like, how do these work together? And just be like, no, they're different. And, but you can, it's like the idea, like the 2-eyed seeing thing. Like you can do both if you're capable of thinking, like jumping that and thinking both ways. Right.
Yeah. We just love a good analogy,
It's great. It helps. It helps us process.
It does. But like, words matter. Because then it has an impact on how we think about them, But like I have an example. Like we have a paper that just came out not that long ago about analyzing post-wildfire vegetation trajectories, and like we did a very like classic Western science approach, classifying plants, native, non-native, right? And the work is alongside the Northern St'át'imc communities, and in particular Squamish First Nation. And the elders were like, we're really worried about the mule deer. They're hungry. Like we're watching how they're browsing on the landscape. It's panicked. It doesn't look normal. Like they're hungry. And so, we went back to the data, like, so, and they wanted us to get this. The other thing is that they wanted us to get the data because the province doesn't have it. Like the government, they're not good. They don't do a lot of research these days. Like 20 years ago, there was a lot of research. They don't, that's not something they really do. And if they try to do it now, I'm sorry, they don't do it that well. And so then the nation said, go out and get the data, because we want to come back to them and say, like, here's where interventions are needed. Like, we're going to speak your language because we care about our land. So we go out, we get the data, we analyze it, and it looks like, well, native cover's actually not that bad, regardless of burn severity. It looks around 25% second year after wildfire, not too bad. But then we went and asked the hunters, like, what do the mule deer eat? And like we had a list from the province of what they said that mule deer eat. And I can tell you that half of that, the hunters are like, no way, they don't eat that.
Yeah.
So we reanalyzed the data. Well, their forage cover is less than 7% across the board. They're starving out there, right? So to me, like that was just the perfect example, even to myself.
Yes. Yep.
Right? Like, so we had a question about something the nation cared about. We deployed a knowledge system that the government understands, but then we changed how we analyzed it using cultural knowledge of what and getting the question down to the value on the landscape that we were managing for, which was mule deer. Right. And then what do they eat, rather than under this plant classification system that was frankly developed, based on a British flora. Like,
right.
Like, let's talk about decolonization. So, to me, like that was exactly an example, right, of how the two things make the knowledge we're gaining so much better. because
Yes.
then their wildlife biologists were like, holy crap, we got to do something out there.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I saw you share that one on LinkedIn, and I was like, what? I read through that. I was like, this is, and it was, I had just finished your book, and then you posted that, and I was like, oh shit. That's a perfect example of exactly what you're talking about, how these two knowledge systems can work in tandem to support each other and find a better way. What is the truth? Let's stop pretending and just what is real,
I'm not,
right?
I wouldn't have gotten to that, if we hadn't done the science part, right? Like we don't have generalized linear mixed models in Indigenous knowledges, right? Like, so, but I think I just think like when we're at, this is also, and I talk about this in my book too, is like knowledge systems aren't just like Indigenous and Western science. It's also like the ranchers. Do you know how many things that I learned from talking to ranchers on the land? Like,
of course.
Yes, they can be a pain in my butt sometimes. Like, I'm not going to lie, but they've been out there for generations. They can see when things change. They can tell me, and people that walk dogs, I talk about that in my book. Like, people who are in a place a lot, like, now, is it the same as being Indigenous? Absolutely not. But do you have something to offer, a perspective, like, yes, we need to go out and get all of it.
Right? Like, isn't it? It's interesting that Western science, it just assumes that experiential knowledge is useless. It's like, nope, it's not objective. And I'm like, you're not objective. Like, this is... But we just like throw it out, right? And it's infuriating because it's like it's setting us so far back.
Right. But then I hear on the flip side of that, biologists like that are backing off too. Like, well, I'm not really sure I know about that because like now we're in this sort of, like, oh, we need to center Indigenous knowledge. And it's like, it's not centering Indigenous knowledge. It's centering the people of the land. Right. But please tell us all that you know. We need it. Right. Like we might not carry the same knowledge basket as you.
Yes.
But like, let's all bring our, like, let's all bring our basket and share what we have, because we're trying to, like, ecology, forest management, like these are some of the most complicated things. Like I was just working with someone in statistics who was like telling me like, stop sending your students to me. I hate veg data. It's so hard.
That's
like,
amazing.
Yeah, because it's hard. It's really, really complicated.
Totally.
So why wouldn't we try and be informed by every possible thing?
Yes.
But I think that's the difference between maybe us and other types of science as well, is that we're working in very applied contexts and we're trying to mobilize, practices as quickly as we can.
Absolutely. But I love that though, because I feel like as people that are like non-Indigenous folks that are cognizant of the harm and the history and are, we're hesitant to create offense or cause more further damage. And like, so there's this hesitancy in this, like, I don't want to step on somebody's toes. I want to be a good ally. I want to be, and so that creates tension as well. Right. And so then people do that, right? They take a step back and it's just like, but everybody I've spoken to, like Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers, like, people like yourself, and they're just like, no, we're not pointing fingers here. Let's stop with this. Like, let's just, can we do this together? Like, what do you know? What do I know? Let's make this work. Right.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated your breakdown of where these two complement each other. Right. Like you talked a lot about the guise of objectivity in Western science and how there's holes in this that just don't, so I want to break that down a little bit more if you can. How do you see these working in tandem, working together? Because like it really does seem like there's complementary opportunity here.
Yeah, I mean, as an Indigenous person who, I grew up with my culture more than I realized, but it wasn't like in the forefront, right?
Okay.
And in fact, because I grew up away from our territory, I'm in Nlaka'pamux, like, I'm a member of Lytton First Nation. I didn't grow up there. And so I didn't have this foundation in our stories or our knowledges per se, but I was fortunate to have other knowledges shared with me because I think there was, when you're Indigenous and you live as an urban Indigenous person, you're finding belonging in different places. And so I was so lucky that, so many of my Coast Salish friends have been generous enough to share knowledges with me. And I think that the more now that I'm spending time with my own nation, like I'm on our lands committee now for Lytton First Nation, and learning our stories and learning our axiology and the depth of connection to place, like through our stories, through the people that are there, that is really helping me to understand that even more our relationship to land cannot be objective. And
Right.
I think how these things though work together is that when you are working alongside people from that place, you are accessing a depth of knowledge. Like it's not just facts. It's more than that. It's very hard to even put it into words, but it's like it brings a ceremony or a reverence to the work that you're doing. And so maybe we have a responsibility in some respects to carry objectivity in the sense that we're trying to do work that honors that depth of relationship, like, and so I think that to me is how those things can be brought together, is like, then we can make a decision about how we're approaching the work that we're doing. That am I honoring that depth of relationship to place in how I'm doing my science or how I'm answering the question? And then, also, am I bringing in both knowledge systems as well? And I feel like a little bit, like, I don't know if I'm quite explaining myself very well, but I think that's the thing that gets missed, is that the reverence, one of my daughters said to me, like, really our religion is our land. And I was like, well, that's a very simple way of putting it, but yeah, right? Like, our origin stories, like it is, and so I think that also helps us behave with objectivity in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
Like if you walked into a church, there are certain ways that you behave in that place, right? Because
yes.
Right. And so then if you're
Respect,
bringing in your objectivity, the things you've learned in Western science, but into a space of that reverence, you're going to use it and wield it differently.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So I don't know.
No, that makes sense. No, it does. It totally makes sense. We're just like, it's respect, right? It's like bringing respect, because like objectivity is this word of like, it comes from caution, right? We're like, we have to be cautious that we're not making assumptions and jumping to conclusions. And that's the purpose of objectivity, right?
Yeah.
That we're not jumping to conclusions and then going off on the wrong path and actually is not true. But we've gotten to the point now where, like we can start, objective is the wrong word, but like, and truth is the wrong word too, because there's a different truth, right? There's many different truths in the world. But the idea is, can we start to round this scientific knowledge off with humanity, with respect,
I like where you're going with caution, right? Because objectivity it's coming out of an abundance of caution to ensure that you're trying to get to as close to the truth as you can. But I think in this case, it's like cautious of what?
Yeah.
Like, what is the caution? Like, what's the what are the values that are driving the caution that you're bringing in? I actually kind of like that. I'm going to have to ruminate on that,
me too.
now, right? but it really does. I find it, it might seem like we're getting into semantics here or something like that, but I just find every time I'm working now, I feel like I'm getting the whole picture more and more and more, the more I do spend time thinking about these things.
Yeah.
And
it feels right.
Yeah. And like, I'm a guest. I mean, this is the thing too, is like, yes, I'm Indigenous, but I'm still a guest in every territory I'm working that isn't my own. Right. And so I have to, and this is the thing I tell my students too, is like, yes, there's often some Indigenous to Indigenous, understanding and stuff, but still, like, I'm still operating and I have to learn the same things that they do. Right.
Yes.
Like, what is the spirit of this place? What are the stories of this place? Like, what has actually happened here? What is wanted? So it's not that different for me, coming in. And I think, ultimately really all it is just coming in with just a helping of humility, which is also something that is not taught, culturally within academia. In fact, I've never met so many egos as I have entering into that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, no, it's true. It's true.
Like the whole incentive structure, like it's all around expertise, and that is something that I think that's also why for so long when I'm spraying weeds, like it's like you're afraid of saying the truth to yourself because you don't want to undermine the expertise you've spent all this time building. Right?
Well, that's the thing. Isn't it interesting that like the expertise thing, like you're almost building up this emotional baggage as time goes on of like, oh, if I'm wrong, then I'm not an expert anymore. Right. And it's like, no, like you still, what hasn't changed, but like our understanding has changed. And it's this interesting, and I feel like also the way I was thinking about it, what you discuss in the book, like the 3 tenets of Indigenous, what did you call it? Did you call it Indigenous research methodology, I think?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And he said respect, relationality, and reciprocity. Mm-hmm. And when I consider those 3 things, it just, I don't know, it feels wholesome, right? Like it feels human. It feels, you're like, oh yeah, like that's almost like, it's almost like thinking about like the 4 Stoic virtues, right? Like it feels the same kind of way. Like how do you live a good life? Like the Stoic virtues are, I forget what they are. It's like wisdom, justice, temperance, and courage, right? Yep. And to me, this is the same kind of thing. It's like but respect.
What are those built on? I mean, this is the thing too, is that it's not knowledge that builds those things, it's wisdom.
Yes, and that's a big difference.
And where does wisdom come from? Experience. And what does science discount? Experience.
Wow, that was a nice, neat little package we made there. Well, I really like that.
I mean, but this is something like when I was getting into the academic game and I was like applying for jobs, I have pages and like I have so many relationships. I've been in it up to, the exact thing that we are training our students to do. I have done it. Right. Yeah. And I thought that counted for something. Mm-hmm. And I learned very quickly that counted for nothing. and so, but that is, I mean, and that's the system, right? Yeah. But here we are challenging a system, and I think it's that, where are we on wisdom? And I think like when I'm, thinking about bringing people in to talk to my grad students, like they're not the usual cast of characters coming in. Like they're people who have spent hard time out in the bush, right? Like, having like that existential, like, oh, what am I doing? But right. But there's an honesty to that. And I think, and there's there's more reliance on wisdom than knowledge. And I think that's what we need. That's what's missing.
You're right. That's to me such a good way to put it. That's such a good way to put it. You're right. It's wisdom over knowledge. And that's I got to ruminate on that one now, because you're right. That wraps it all up. That makes sense. Like it's totally.
When you share a story, you're often you're trying to share wisdom, right? Yeah. Like my students just did like wilderness first aid, which they thought was a real racket, and they learned a ton. But then like I was sitting, like the guy who was driving the water taxi that we were using this week, we were having discussions about all of our, mess ups and experiences and crazy stories, and their eyes are getting bigger and bigger. But like, they were like, oh, they didn't talk about that in the course. Right. But it's like, I'm sharing this, like, learn from us, learn, right. Like this. So I just think we can't be, this would also mend, I think, that divide between practitioners and academics. Right.
I think you're right. Yeah. Taking the pressure off. Right. just like, and making it real. I love that.
Yeah.
I've after reading your book, I was considering the changes we're talking about making, and the type of relationality that we're discussing creating in professionals and academia and just like in society at large, right? And if I'm honest, I was in love with the whole concept, and I'm thinking about it like, this is great. I love this. I'm all in. And then I get a little bit disheartened when I think about the reality of the colonial system, right? Like of capitalism, and this, we live in a system of me, take, mine. Like that's what it is. And there's phones, and there's so many ways to get these little dopamine rushes, and it's hard. It's so easy to be disconnected and to not be relational, and like you said about community, right? It's so easy now to just lock your door and watch Netflix and not talk to anybody, and be like, oh, someone's at the door, like I better hide, and to just be to just be a hermit, right? And not talk to anyone. You can do that now. Yeah. And so when I think about trying to counteract that system, and you could call it a system of oppression, like intentional or not, right? It's the way it's happened. I'm so overwhelmed, right? Because I think it's like, wait, we got to fight. We got to go get to that. How? How do we fight people's incessant need to buy or do things, or just like that mentality, and switch back to reciprocity and relationality and respect? And I'm like, man, that is a hill that we got to climb. And I don't know how you feel about it. I don't know if but I would like to know. I would like to know what you think. If you think is this a hill that we're capable of climbing and getting over, as a culture?
I don't think it's a hill. Okay. I think anyone involved in anything around land management, ecological restoration, like it is easy to get down, or to be an Indigenous person, dealing in any Indigenous matter around sovereignty, right? Yeah. It is very easy to get down. But I think it's just like, I see such a discipline in my own elders, and ones that I've been like, whoa, we're never going to it's just one more thing that's like stopping us from doing the thing we want to do. And they're like, no, but look where we are. And that this is the work. Like, if we're going to treat it like a hill, we're never getting to the top. Right. But what are the seeds that we're planting that create change? And that's small. Like we're not thinking ever that we're going to have a flower tomorrow, Right. So why am I thinking like that's what we're going to do really quickly? Right. So I think this is also one of the great advantages of working in community, is like, here is where I can affect some change. Like I can take the skills, the knowledge basket that I have, and apply it to outcomes that they would like. And that is something I can contribute to. And are we going to bump into and I don't know, am I allowed to swear on your,
go for
podcast?
It.
But it's not to say we don't bump into colonial bullshit all the time, right? Like I've got a 5-acre plant nursery in the Cowichan Estuary right now that the Agricultural Land Commission calls not agriculture. So, are those little annoyances? Like, yeah, they are. And is that a big issue? Maybe. But what we can do, like with that project, is bring as many people as we can there and share the hope, the positivity, the love, the knowledge, the inspiration of that place, and let that do the work for us, and that might be naive, but I feel like then I don't feel hopeless or like it's too much or whatever. It's just, we just keep moving ahead these little bit by little bit. But boy, when we take a step back and we look at where we are now, that's amazing. I constantly have a check on myself where I think, what would my great grandparents think about this moment? Like they would be confused, right? Like, sorry. So they care about your identity. They want to know what we have to say. and they're listening to us, like, right? I mean, like, and my great grandmother was like an absolutely hysterical woman, so I think it would go down exactly like that. Like, you got to be shitting me. Like, this is right.
Yeah.
Like, but it is. I mean, I think it's important to remember that. I think about the grad students that are in my lab who are mentoring as well. Like, what seeds are they going to plant? There's a lot of power in that.
Totally.
They're going to be decision makers one day. Like, most of them are not Indigenous, right? Like, but they're going to have this experience that nobody I worked with had.
Yeah.
So how is that going to influence policy and regulations and land care and sustainability? Like, I can't wait to see, totally. And then how are they going to mentor the next? I mean, so I feel, maybe it's naive, but I feel so incredibly hopeful, and that it's not all bad out there,
Totally.
and yes, there's crap. And yes, there's days where I'm just like, oh, like, why, but this is the system we're in. It is being made better. We can keep helping it to be better. But if we're trying to bite the whole thing off for ourselves, that's a very good recipe to give up.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you're totally right. Like, I agree. Generally speaking, I tend to be fairly optimistic, but I had a moment after your book where I was like, oh man, can we do this? But I agree with you. Like, it's when I think back on the last like 10 years alone and the progress that has been had with, Truth and Reconciliation Commission and UNDRIP and all this stuff, there's so much societal momentum, and like now there's real things happening on the ground that we can point to and be like, look at all these changes, and you're like, oh yeah, no, this is moving quite quickly actually, even though there's a long ways to go, sure, and there's still lots that needs to happen. But I think that's also the nature of humanity, is like we're always going to be pushing. There's no end. There's no like, that's it, we did it, it's all finished. It's like, no, we're always going to be pushing, and so this is a pretty good rate. I think you're right. Yeah.
No, and I think we just have to make sure that we're just doing our part. Whatever that is. Nothing is small. But I just like bringing magic back into the work, because I think also like we can't be motivated also by changing a system. Like, sure. I think we need to be motivated in the connectivity and in the harmony and in the love of land and place. Like, I had a student last night, like, so we're out on this research station, Quaker First Nations, they have a research station that was a fish farm. Which feels really good. Like, now it's not a fish farm. Now it's this, in my opinion, force for good. Sorry, fish farms. Not sorry at all. But we're out there, and last night the phosphorescence or the bioluminescence was in the water, and I had a couple students experience it for the first time, and they're drawing in the water with their hands, and I'm listening to them just have this experience, But like for me, like they will be forever changed by that experience,
Absolutely.
And that is what motivates us to do good and to like that bit of magic in the land, in the water, like they'll remember that as then they're, trying to solve whatever problem they've been tasked with. Right.
Yes.
Is just to be pushed by this magic. And I think as adults, that's something we lose, also is. And I think that is something that our stories and our axiology and we never lose that. That in nature, like the reverence and relationship and like, so I think that's a challenge to all of us to like keep that alive, because that's what feeds us. Yeah.
Oh, that's so nice. I like that a lot, because you're right. It's so easy to get jaded and to just be upset and angry and want to push, and you get you get to a place where you're anarchy and you're just, right.
I wrote a very angry letter to the premier a week and a half ago, right? Like, it's not that I don't go there, but then I'm like, okay, now I got to go feed myself, now I need to go remember the why and find the things that I can change, that I can, like I've done my part, but it's hard. And I think also, we're going to start coming up against, different forms of resistance than we anticipated, like I've got I've got a group right now that's protesting our ecological restoration in the estuary. Like, I never thought we were going to come to a day where people were protesting ecological restoration, but here we are,
Right.
you know.
Right.
But you know, it's always another mosquito, as one of the elders told me, and you know, we just have to flip that away and just keep going, you know. And I think I really love that so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a more powerful place to stand, to be thinking about, you know, coming from a place of love rather than a place of hate or a place of anger or wanting to make change, but you're a place of like, I want healthy, I want happy, I want love, that's like it's so much more motivating. Right?
Well, and it's so much less divisive. Like, you know, you want to disarm someone who's angry and just say like, I just want everybody to have food. I just want, you know, like I want our air to be clean. Like, these are all very unifying things. But I think when we get stuck in the jargon, or we allow ourselves, you know, with our phones to kind of create this reality where everything's against us, you know, I mean, this week we just spent up on the old fish farm, like in the research station. Like, we don't have any internet up there other than, I mean, now thanks Elon, we got some Starlink, you know, so we have power a couple hours a day. And so we turn that on a little bit, you know, but like the connectivity of spending time together and talking and all of that, like, boy, I think we need to spend more time like that. And I think, you know, that's related to our work too, like in forestry and ecological restoration, is like, I think one of the things that's really changed my work a lot is having all of the people from the different knowledge systems out on land together talking.
Yeah. Yes. So important.
Yeah.
That's what we need now. We need everybody at the same table discussing their struggles, what they're running up against, and like, how can we collaborate? Like, collaboration, we're in the age of collaboration.
Yeah. But just also like, I think too often we're brought around tables, and I do talk about this in the book too, as stakeholders. Like, what are you representing when you come around it? But for me, it's like, I want to be out there with all the people that hold all the different types of knowledges. And instead of talking through why something's hard or what we're, you know, is, or what we're up against, is like, what are we trying to make?
Yeah.
But what's been interesting about framing it like that is so often people don't actually know.
Right. They forget their why.
Well, they just don't even know. Like, if you're, there's this old cut block and, you know, we want to make it a food forest or whatever, like, but what does that mean? Like, what are we trying to make together? You know, and then we can rally everybody around it. Like, but we just also, you know, we come at problems from like, what are the regulatory hurdles in the way? And what are the, you know, like,
it's true.
I mean, of which there are often many, but I think also when you think about what it is that you want to make and you've got the magic of that, then you're more likely to bring people alongside to help do that other work that will make it possible.
Totally. So much more powerful, right? Always got to center it back in that, like, okay, what and why, right? Like, what do we actually, what is the end goal here? What are we doing? Because it's so easy to get lost in the bureaucracy and the legislation and everything else that humans have created to make our lives more complicated.
Right? I mean, we're so good at getting in our own way, you know, but I think like this is also where like our worldview, like, you know, those values of relationship with land, how do we strengthen relationship to land, relationship to one another, keeps us out of that territory, you know? Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I really appreciated, just as a quick aside, but I really appreciated the chapter on terminology in your book and the importance of, like, I think you were hoping to change. I think you have a whole index in the back. I listened to the book, so I didn't actually see it, but I was listening to you talk, which was cool. I feel like I've been talking to you for 10 hours now, but in a good way. But I think you went like from stakeholders to partners. And there was a bunch of, but you had a bunch of stuff that you suggested. You're like, these are ways that we can change. And you talked about the importance of terminology and how that the words you use change your relationship to the thing you're talking about. And it was a very powerful message. And with the examples you gave, and I don't have them, so anyone listen will have to go out and read the book. This is a little plug for you. But it's all in there, and it's just so powerful, and it brought so much perspective for me of to like the importance of terminology and words and why those things. I know people get frustrated. Why are we changing this? Like we're focusing on the wrong thing. And it's like, no, because this matters.
Yeah.
It's making it more human centric and nature centric and not this other thing. Right. And
it sets intention.
Totally right. Thank you.
It sets intention but you know the problem with it though now, and I really encourage people like, you know, to interrogate the words that you use. And it's not because they're right or wrong. It's just like, is this bringing you towards the thing that you want, you know? But now when I have students writing papers or like writing funding proposals, I'm having to go through and be like, so how we talk in the lab is not how everybody else talks. Like,
they're not going to know what you mean.
They're not going to understand this. Like, you know, or like, this doesn't sound sciencey enough for an NSERC. Like, you know, but I love it because they do, like, I see it in them. Like they speak differently. And I think for them, you know, like that they have taken it up because it feels natural for them.
Absolutely.
You know, and yeah, it's so exciting and it's so cool. Like, you know, like, I mean, I listen to it all week and they come up with words all the time. We laugh, but it helps us. It helps us to navigate. It helps us not to get stuck in what we've been taught or how we think about things. Right. Like this morning that we were calling, like where we were yesterday, we called it the kerfuffled forest. Like, you know, because it was like having an identity crisis and it didn't know what it wanted to be. And it, you know, like that was the feeling from it. Right. And so but that helped us then to be like, okay, how do we help it not feel that way? Right.
I love that. That's fantastic. It's always changing, right?
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's the thing is like, and that changes depending on place, you know, and we have, but
language is not static, nor is the land, right?
Exactly. Right. The ecosystem's not static and there's no right or wrong. It's just, you know, again, it's just trying to move towards a different end and hopefully, you know, I mean, I don't even want to say a better one, just the one we want.
Yeah. I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
All right. I have one more question for you.
Sure.
And it's just like, I try to leave people with like actionable material, like even if it's just internally actionable, like just like something like, okay, you finish listening to this episode. How can I take action on these things that I've just ruminated on and considered, right? So what I wanted to ask you was, a lot of this is about shifting perspective. It's a lot about appreciating other ways of seeing, other ways of knowing, and other ways of experiencing the world. And I think that's one of the hardest things we can ask someone to do is to step outside of their own shoes and into someone else's, right? So do you have like, maybe, I don't know, maybe you have a challenge for people to try, or maybe there's like just some kind of advice or something that you would think would be helpful for people to take away from this and to, you know, practice with their kids or whatever, just somewhat way of trying to experience someone else's perspective. And I feel like that would be helpful as a takeaway for folks.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I love is like making myself a stranger somewhere I've been a lot. Okay. Right. And, you know, so like a park that you walk through with your dog every single day or something like that, you know, where you sit on the bench and you pretend that you have never been there before. And I think what's interesting about that is it forces you to notice things that you don't ordinarily notice because you're so familiar with it, right? Like you already know the playground's over there and there's, right? Like, and so then you start to maybe notice like, oh, the grass is a different color over there than here. And like, oh, there's these birds I've never noticed, you know, but I think that doing that helps us not to take on someone else's perspective, but to realize the limitations of our own perspective. Where we think we know something, but really we limit ourselves in our time, our attention, all of these things that, you know, we aren't giving our full selves, you know, so I think, you know, and you can do that. That's not limited to place. I mean, that can be done within the context of a relationship with someone.
Oh, that sounds powerful.
Like, I
That
mean,
sounds
I've
very
kind of
powerful.
messed around with that with my own husband, right? Who like irritates me routinely, right? Like as I do him, right? Like if you live with the same person for 25 years, but if I treat him like a stranger that I'm just meeting, like that really changes things, like
Totally.
how can I get to
Yep.
know you better? Because also like a forest, people change over time, like my children have, I have twin daughters and they've just moved on to UBC this year. And I realized like, I don't really know them as these young adults, right? Like, so I think, we can do it within our jobs. Like, so I think just purposefully becoming a stranger to something so that we can take it in more fully, and that is what brings the wonder, curiosity, all of the good things, back into our lives. And that like this relationality, it's not like it's expansive, it's like the universe, right? Like, it's
Sure.
just, yeah. So I think that's what I really wanted people to leave my work with, is that, just this possibility of greater connectivity and making the old new again,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I have to tell you, Jen, you sure know how to do a hell of a podcast.
Well, that's really nice. Thank you.
This is fantastic. Like, this is so good.
I've really appreciated the conversation, and I hope there's, opportunity for more conversations like this, because I just feel like the more I hang out with grad students and other land stewards, the more, when I left this morning, they were like, how do we keep doing this? And it was exactly like these kinds of this kind of conversation we just had is, how are we cultivating that in our daily lives, so right. It's good medicine for me too. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you for taking the time to do this. Cause like, these are the types of moments that I seek out when I'm trying to do these recordings, right? Like you want realness, genuine realness, like what's going on, and like it doesn't happen a lot. And so when I get to speak with someone like yourself who can just be genuine and out there, and it's just like it feels so real, it's like a breath of fresh air. So thank you. This is great. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you.
It's a powerful way for me to polish off this podcast for the time being, at least, anyways, right? So
awesome.
Yeah. Very appreciative.
I can't wait to hear it. And I really appreciate you taking the time, and and just being able to kind of, this is the work too, right? Is having these kinds of conversations. So
yeah, no, it's true. Just getting the word out there. So I hope it gets out to a lot of folks. So this is amazing. Thanks so much.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for listening. Wasn't that a doozy? Right? A breath of fresh air. You're just like so much clarity. When we're looking through the haze of information and science and pressure and culture, and you try to figure this thing out, and this just, it feels like such a straight and simple path we can all do. Right? It's nice. So yeah, if you have any questions for myself or for Jen, shoot me an email at yourforestpodcast@gmail.com, and I will get back to you. Or you can reach out to the Indigenous Ecology Lab as well. You can look that up. It's all there. There'll be stuff in the show notes for you. So, yeah. Take her easy. 2 episodes left. 1 more recorded, and the last one's going to be a bit of a review. A bit of a best of type thing. That'll happen in December. So, all right. Take it easy. Thanks for listening. Talk to you later.